refer to as the classic conspirafact of chemtrails, of turning our skies into glorified computer monitors to stage some grandioso event. These are all narratives that we've heard about chemtrails. But before we delve into that, Dr. Baker, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for giving up your time. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get diving into this.
Well, thanks for having me, Ron. I was connected with you through the Independent Medical Alliance and some folks there. I'm a senior fellow with the Independent Medical Alliance in the United States, which is a group of physicians who became aware of all of the COVID malfeasances that were going on fairly early, and we joined up into a group. Originally, it was called the FLCCC, which was the Frontline Clinical Care Consortium. That's a little clunky, so they changed it into Independent Medical Alliance. And we're trying to give patients and the whole, if we can, to what extent we can, the whole world, we have some international members, an alternative to the sort of traditional, if you want to call it, or system medicine that is really has just refused to accept the evils of the COVID era largely, and has largely refused to reform itself. So we want to reform medicine, but we also want to give people a viable alternative to just going into the maw of the beast when you seek medical care. And one of the folks there, I think was Lynn Christensen, put me in contact with you all, saying that you guys were interested in hearing about my views on geoengineering and the slang term that we hear so often is chemtrails. And it's something that I've taken on as a major concern of mine, because it's a huge, huge health problem. And it's a huge problem that in many ways is incredibly similar to the whole pandemic, plandemic, scamdemic, whatever you want to call it, preparedness model that brought us COVID. And we can get into that with some of the similarities during the show.
Yeah, and I think I'm excited for this one because it's gone on forever. You know, I live in Scotland, and I can remember seeing what I used to call the Scottish flag in the sky. I remember as a little kid, because it just looked like that, you know, in the sky. Never questioned it as you know, a young child, but obviously it's quite a sinister plot when you get into it. So take us through it. Take us through this entire conspiracy and psyop, because take us through it, Doctor.
All right. So the first thing I'd like to say, Ron, is to your listeners and to anyone who else happens to stumble into this subject, is that the geoengineering is absolutely real. We're not talking about a conspiracy theory. We're talking about a conspiracy fact. I mean, we're talking about a real process that's going on, and that's not subjective. That's demonstrated by decades and decades and decades of government papers, government materials that are actually available. It's kind of hiding in plain sight in many ways, and various scandals that have happened over the decades in the UK as well as in the United States. There's plenty of government documents in terms of funding, in terms of patents. There's over 1,000 patents for geoengineering in the United States alone. We know that it's being done largely as a military operation, although the best way to describe it in my mind is kind of all of the above, you know, like an old-fashioned multiple choice question. The correct answer is E, all of the above, because it's now being done not only by governments, but also by private contractors with governments, small-scale people doing things like cloud seeding, which is just one small percentage of this, and you know, international sort of technocrats. NATO is heavily involved in this. The UN is heavily involved in this. And I don't know if you saw, James O'Keefe did the sting operation at Davos and showed that there were people, there's a whole geoengineering party going on at Davos, and a bunch of people he caught on camera, you know, bragging about the operations, the private venture capital that's going into this as well. So it's a very complicated subject, but the first thing that people need to understand is that their eyes are not deceiving them. That picture that you show right there is absolutely real. It's not water vapor. It's not contrails. This is particulate matter that is deliberately being sprayed from airplanes into the sky. It settles out, it flattens out, as you're seeing on some of the trails there. That's actually a very good picture, because you can see, if you look at the one going sort of from the lower left to the sort of mid right, there's a very sharp trail there that has not yet had a chance to, there you go, that has not had a chance to kind of dissipate. But then if you go higher up in the picture, you can see that these particulate matters are starting to settle and spread out. And then what they do is they end up gathering moisture with them, and then eventually they'll form that sort of low-lying flat cloud layer that we see so much of the time now, what I call kind of a wet diaper sort of cloud cover. And there you go again. So the sharp one that's sort of in the center right is a relatively fresh one. And then the ones that it's crossing have been there for a little while, and they are dissipating, spreading out, and forming this artificial cloud layer when the particulate matter absorbs water and becomes basically artificial clouds. Then what happens is, you've seen the ones that are kind of serrated, they kind of look like fish scales or something along those lines. The military has a tremendous number of electromagnetic frequency pulses that they can send through there to kind of turn it into a metallic cloud layer. Some of this is for weaponizing weather. Some of this is for improving communication systems. And that's one aspect. I just can't stress enough that there's multiple things going on here. And I saw the person putting in a comment that these are nanoparticulates of heavy metals, and that's absolutely true. So let me take a step back and just say that there's a number of different processes that are going on here.
Okay.
They're all bad. But really what we're talking about is a multifocal attack on our atmosphere. Much of it's military, as we said, to manipulate the weather, to weaponize the weather. Some of it is in the name of mitigating global warming, but that's largely a front. That's largely an excuse that they give. Most of this, in my estimation, is military. So what are the types of things that they're doing? I'll just give you some, because I said, it's all of the above. Sure. So there's a couple of different ways that they're doing this. The first generation, or if you want to call it the old-fashioned type of stuff, I don't know if you're familiar, but way back, I think it was in the late 40s, maybe early 50s, there was a disaster in Wales where they tried to do some cloud seeding, and they washed a whole Welsh village away. They did some similar things in the United States. The United States actually used heavy cloud seeding during Vietnam in a top secret project called Project Popeye. This was around 1966 to 1967. And essentially what they did is they constantly cloud seeded the air over the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam to stop the supplies coming through from China. And their motto of this secret project was "Make mud, not war." And this was basically exposed, and people were outraged at the time. You can look up Project Popeye. It's not hard to find. So we know that weather has been actively weaponized by the United States government on multiple circumstances in the past. But the old-fashioned cloud seeding is really a small percentage of what's going on here. And in the United States, particularly west of Mississippi, it's out in the open. It's legal. There's very little regulation for it, but they typically use silver iodide, and sometimes they used to use dry ice, but they basically use silver iodide and other particles now. They'll go into cloud cover or existing clouds. They will put these particulate matters in there, and that will, the way that the technology that they have, the knowledge that they have, they can get rain or snow to take place kind of on command. A lot of farmers out west in the United States feel somewhat dependent upon this. So this is a tough subject. And they even use it to build snowpack in some of the big ski areas as well. So west of the Mississippi, the old-fashioned cloud seeding is still very, very popular. And my understanding is that's what happened in Dubai. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago in Dubai, there were these torrential biblical floods. Now, Dubai doesn't get natural torrential floods, but they did from the cloud seeding efforts that they were doing there. That's the old-fashioned first-generation stuff. The newer stuff, the so-called second-generation stuff, is what we're seeing with these large-scale CHEMTRAILS. That's the stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI. And so what you've got there is you've got nano metals, oftentimes aluminum, barium, strontium, and other metals that are sprayed into the air, into the stratospheric layer at different heights. And these will do, as we said before, they will sort of settle out, they will spread and widen, and they will collect moisture. And this will not only cause that, you see the serrated cloud layer in that picture
Right.
at the lower level, that's what we're talking about there. There's also another technology that they use called solar radiation management. And typically what they use for that is sulfur dioxide and or sulfuric acid. Sulfur dioxide, I believe, is a precursor for sulfuric acid. And the idea is that you lace the upper atmosphere with sulfuric acid or sulfur dioxide, and that reflects sunlight back into space. So we have a whole lot of things going on. Now, how did they come up with these technologies? The sulfuric acid is as you may know, is basically one of the main acid particles that is associated with the old acid rain of the 1970s, which was largely due to industrial pollutants. Nowadays, the industrial pollutants are largely captured, particularly when we burn coal. For example, in the United States, they have devices that can capture the ash before it goes up into the atmosphere. Well, what happens is you end up with huge amounts of leftover coal fly ash, is what it's called, basically burnt ash, that you have to dispose of some way. And believe it or not, these people, these absolute lunatics, have hit on the idea of taking it up in airplanes and dispensing it back into the atmosphere.
It's mad.
And it's madness. It's absolute madness. And the idea is ostensibly that they do this. Well, first of all, they try to deny it. They try to tell you that it's just water vapor from the airplane contrails, which is absolute nonsense. So look at that. You can see that you've got already a layer of the wet diaper cloud layer, and then you can see that where there's a hole in it, they're sending more spray through. So this is absolutely deliberate cloud cover. Now, the other thing that's really crazy about this is that it actually doesn't work the way it's advertised. Because if you put a blanket over something, say you put a reflective blanket, 10,000 feet or 20,000 feet above the surface of the earth, you might reflect some of the sunlight back. But what do you do with the heat that's down on the ground level? You trap it inside the blanket. So it actually does not cause cooling of the Earth's surface. It actually causes the opposite. They can also manipulate this. I'm sure you've heard of some of the electromagnetic radiation.
Just one second. Is it not quite telling that they're admitting to cloud seeding and they're obviously pushing the benefits of it? And we're now obviously in an undeniable realm of the chemtrails. It's clearly a way of disposing of trash. Let's just sum it up that way.
And getting paid to do it, Ron.
And being paid to do it, right? Now,
yes.
I imagine they're only really admitting to things that they can profit from publicly, right? Making snowy places snowier, making farmers' crops more croppier, So when we look at the big picture of this, there's been so many accounts where I think things have gone wrong, where people in America have reported layers of dust gathering on their cars or on trees and all of that. Just before you carry on with what you were saying, can you talk about moments where you, as a doctor, have seen where they've screwed up and the veil's dropped a little bit? Because a lot of people talk about, someone said it in the side chat, weird stuff showing up in the water bowls they leave out for animals and things like this. Now, a certain amount of that will be animals, drinking and stuff falling off their little beards and things like this. But can you comment on times where it's really become obvious for you?
100%. Yeah. So a couple of the ones that I think are really telling.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'd just say very quickly, let's take it back again, decades. I wish I had the name of it, but I know that it's readily available. You can look it up right on Wikipedia, which is, CIA run agent, website, but it's still on there.
That's right.
The Welsh disaster is well documented. Project Popeye back in the 60s in Vietnam is well documented. There was also a project called Project Cirrus where they were manipulating hurricanes in the southeast part of the United States, and one went and hit, I believe it was Savannah, Georgia, and just absolutely pummeled Savannah, Georgia. So
is this one you're talking about?
Yeah, I believe so. The Aberfan disaster. Yes. And
Wow.
so these are instances where there's no question in retrospect that these governments have done this and have totally screwed up.
What are we looking at? What are we looking at here, Doctor? I mean, what is this? Is this oil? Is this lava? Like,
I believe it is a landslide from the excessive cloud seeding that they
wow.
performed in
Oh,
area.
wow. Okay.
Yep. And so you can look up Project Cirrus in the United States.
Project Cirrus, right? 1 second.
And so there have been many episodes in the past, in the remote past, where ultimately it comes out in and is.
Are you okay?
Yeah, sure. There's many episodes where, years on, decades on, they sort of half admit that something happened. But it's not something where we see any change in behavior. It's just kind of, oh yeah, that's what we did. So Project Cirrus was this hurricane modification that went wrong many decades ago in the United States, and they just slammed into, I believe it was Savannah, Georgia, and just did a tremendous amount of damage there. There were some people who were, I believe, got eventually some, payment from the U.S. government, but it didn't stop this. You're talking about more recent incidents where it becomes obvious. One of them in the United States was the Camp Mystic disaster around July 4th of 2025. And this was in Central Texas. There are rivers in Central Texas that are prone to flooding. And there was absolutely catastrophic flooding in the days following known cloud seeding. There it is. Yep, the girls' camp swept away by a horrific deluge. And this was an incident where we know that there was cloud seeding going on upriver, upstream of this, up to a day or two before this happened. I think a few dozen girls were swept away to their deaths, and other people were killed as well. Now, when you're talking about the strange occurrences where people aren't sure what's going on, a classic example which happened back in Christmas time of 2024 was what is now known as FogVid 24. And again, this even has its own, again, Wikipedia page. It's basically the first word out of their mouth is this is a conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. But there were widespread reports in the United States and abroad that there was an unnatural sort of dry fog that was present for a couple of weeks around Christmas time throughout the United States and in some foreign countries as well. And people were stating that they were getting sick. There were some people did private testing of their water, and they found some bacteria in it that are suspicious for government involvement. In particular, there is a bacteria that I'm familiar with as a physician called Serratia marcescens, which is believe it or not, is sort of a favorite test bacteria of the deep state in the United States, the CIA. And they were caught in the 1950s spraying this from a ship onto San Francisco. And they were testing to see if they dispersed a biological agent, would it spread in the way that they wanted it to spread? And what happened was one patient died and about a half a dozen people got sick with this Serratia marcescens bacteria, which was a very unusual bacteria at the time for people to have human sickness from. And over the next couple of decades, they determined that it was in fact due to this spraying operation that the government had done. And it just happens to be a favorite bacteria of the United States government. And now people are finding by reports. I don't have, I haven't read the exact reports, and I don't know the chain of custody or how what labs they were doing. But there were multiple reports after this fogvid event that Serratia was showing up in people's water and so on, which strongly suggests that somebody is testing biological agents again, presumably from the air. And so we're dealing with all kinds of strange occurrences. We're put at a tremendous disadvantage in terms of knowing what's causing them, but they're unmistakably taking place. And some things we do know. So a lot of what we've just been talking about, Ron, is a bit speculative, but a lot of there's a lot that we do know about what is going on there.
Yeah. A few years ago, people were saying a lot of speculative things about Prince Andrew. It's amazing how a few months, if not years, can change a narrative. And of course, we've went from no cloud seeding to cloud seeding, no chemtrails to chemtrails. And nothing is done by these people for the goodness of us. Okay. It's money, control, and power. That's it. And there's been some incredibly odd photographs around the world. Okay. Then a lot of them predate the AI sweep, right? Of clouds that look like horsemen, towns and cities in the sky, all of this. Do you believe that these are little testers? Okay. And I'm not saying all of them, Dr. Baker, because obviously there's some shenanigans that goes on the internet. But there's been some moments where you've got to think to yourself, that's a little convenient. Like, it feels a lot like they're testing the water for something bigger. And of course, there is this, are they turning our skies into a TV screen? And if so, are they planning some alien or religious prophet event as a Hail Mary plan? Not as a something to do on a Tuesday, but as a Hail Mary plan for something. What's your take on that?
Some of the really, really out there stuff is a little beyond my knowledge of. I don't put too much past what these people will do. I mean, I think they will do whatever they feel they can get away with, or whatever they feel they need to do to maintain power. That said, I am not knowledgeable enough about the unexplained, sightings and so on. I do remember about a year ago, maybe perhaps a little bit more, between Trump's win in the November elections in 2024 and taking office, that there's a tremendous amount of drone and UFO type sightings in the Northeast, particularly in the New Jersey area. I don't know what to make of those things. I'm loath to discredit anybody out of hand who's on the ground and sees strange things. I don't know quite how to explain those. I can tell you that there is considerable thinking that this is involved in enhancing communication systems. Because if you put metallicized material into the atmosphere, it makes it considerably easier to transmit radio signals and whatnot that you may want to do. So I think that's part of it.
The reason I asked you about those photographs in the sky and all the kind of wackier stuff is, do you think that if they were responsible for putting out those images, it creates a sense in people's mind of, oh, well, that's obviously fake. It must all be fake, right? When really the underlying reason is this communication. And again, when people hear communication, come on, Dr. Baker, like they're just going to put up some satellites, right? That's how they're going to do it. But when you consider the powers at Bees want for this global unity, who knows what they've got planned, what technology will bring. And we've seen Tesla batteries and contactless charging and all of this. It leads to think quite a scary possibility of what the outcome could be, because they ain't making us smarter and healthier, Doctor. I'll tell you that right now. Okay.
I agree with you. So one thing I would say is this: if we go back, we started with some of the really early stuff. So we talked about that cloud seeding from the 40s and even beyond, before then, which again still takes place and can still be catastrophic, but is really just the first generation stuff. When we talk about this SAI, the stratospheric aerosol injection, and we talk about putting these particulate metals into the atmosphere, there's potentially multiple reasons for it. The first is, again, it's a lot easier to control weather patterns if you have material in it that is electrically controllable, more so than, say, just water vapor or the other natural gases. So a lot of this is weaponizing the weather. You may have seen the old films of both John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson, saying that, he who controls the weather controls the world. It's an open secret that governments have been trying to manipulate weather patterns and have been manipulating weather patterns with varying degrees of success for many decades, essentially since the end of World War II. And a lot of this came out of a lot of the original weather modification side of geoengineering comes indirectly out of the World War II technologies that were derived by the United States. So the United States not only was doing the Manhattan Project, which, as we all know, was this heavily top secret, decompartmentalized, huge effort to build the atomic bomb, but they also had a number of other large-scale research projects going. One of them was the radiation labs, the so-called RAD lab at MIT, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And this, the British originated radar, but the United States, to a large extent, developed it during the war through the RAD lab and other places. Now we're talking about telecommunications. We're talking about emitting radiation to detect airplanes, whatever you might want to detect. And they recognize that they can manipulate, to a certain extent, not just detect, but manipulate clouds and weather patterns with this technology. And so this became an absolutely huge area of top secret study in the wake of World War II, kind of as a sort of a partner to the nuclear weapons research.
Do you think, were they rubbing their hand in their evil layers going, oh, well, if we can't drop bombs on them, we'll block the sun. Their crops will fail. We'll flood their cities. I mean, that is evil genius in a cave off the side of a cliff shaped like a skull level of like madness.
There's multiple government documents in the United States. I assume there are some in the UK. I'm sure there are in Russia and China. I'm sure there are in Israel that are devised that openly state what they want to do in terms of manipulating the weather. So there's a famous white paper, sort of this research paper from decades ago in the United States called Owning the Weather in 2025, which is from the late 90s. There's another one from, I believe, the 1970s that's forest fires as a weapon. There's another one called, I think it's weather control as a force multiplier. So these are all, there's the paper trail's there. There's no question about it. And I'll tell you, there's a book that just got published that's a wonderful resource for this. It's Peter Kirby's Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project, which is a wonderful deep dive book into the history of weather modification in the United States. And it kind of starts, he calls it a New Manhattan Project. He goes back and looks at all of these old documents. It really is, like you say, the evil scientists rubbing their hands together. And some of the people that are involved in this, incidentally, are your classic evil scientists. So people you may be familiar with. Differing people will tell you who Dr. Strangelove from Stanley Kubrick's movie is based upon. Some people will tell you it's Edward Teller, who is the father of the hydrogen bomb, and the others will tell you it's John von Neumann, who was one of the early scientists in the computer world. But they are both deeply involved in this technology in the early years. There's other kind of mad scientist types. I don't know if you remember the popular novelist Kurt Vonnegut, but his brother Bernard was one of these guys as well. So there's absolutely no question the United States and other countries have been researching weaponizing the weather, controlling the weather for decades and decades. And incidentally, I always mispronounce his name, but the former president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, I think had spoken decades ago in front of the UN General Assembly, saying that NATO, Israel, and the United States are cutting off the water supply to Iran. Iran has had consistent droughts for decades now, and it's very plausible that that has actually been done.
It's kind of wild. And let me ask, is there any links to, because obviously after World War II, right, there was a lot of technologies and sciences and research that was taken from the Nazis' side, shall we say. Was there any evidence that any of their scientists had anything to do with this sort of weather modification plan, or that there was any connections there? Because it seems like if it can go back that far, there's always a mad Nazi involved in these plots round about that time. So is there any links to any of those individuals?
Yeah, I would have to go back and review some of the documents in more detail, but certainly the operation, I believe it was called Operation Paperclip, where the United States went and obtained a bunch of the Nazi scientists like Wernher von Braun and people like that. Of course, von Braun was very high up in NASA, which is deeply involved in this process as well. So I can't speak definitively to whether we have actual bona fide Nazis involved, but it's very much in the same wheelhouse. When you're talking about people like Edward Teller, when you're talking with people like von Neumann, you're really talking about the same crowd of people that would have been pulled into this. And of course, von Braun was intimately involved in the rocket technology. So we're in the same wheelhouse. I'm not sure I can pick a particular Nazi and put him on the board of directors, but yeah.
Right, off the shelf of evildoers. Do you know what I'm saying? So, I just wanted to ask you that one, because it's always something that makes me wonder about evil scientists and the timeline of this.
I would just say that it's not a made up trope. I mean, Mary Shelley came up with the evil scientist par excellence back in 1808. So this has been going on for a long time, and really prescient people have known that science has a way to get completely out of control and to be completely amoral and immoral and evil. And it's not for nothing that we have, Dr. Evil in the movie. It's something that exists.
It really does. And now, do you know another thing that makes alarm bells for me, Dr. Baker, is when a technology comes to fruition and it's not commercialized to a point where they're like, hey, farmers, just so you know, you want to have better crops this year, you can follow 0800 cloud seeding and all of this stuff, right? Because that sounds like good business. It sounds like great business. But the minute you take it to that point, everyone's going to be inspecting, finding out what you're doing, all of that, because this should be the number one thing in the world. If there's no drawbacks, nothing to our health, no ulterior motives, no borium, no aluminum, none of the nasty stuff, this should be the number one business in the world, right? Because how great it would be to be able to have nice summers and snowy Christmases and all of that. Mm-hmm. That's not the case here. I mean, if they're not going to put it to the mainstream, it's because there's a massive conspiracy and secret. I mean, it's become my go-to identifier for a lot of these technologies that are, hey, they're helping us, but don't just ignore the fact they're top secret and ignore the fact that you can't read the documents. Everything's cool. It's the highest level of trust me, bro, that there is.
Absolutely. And you're hitting the target here. And one thing I'd like to point out to people, if I may for a second, is just do a quick comparison between the whole gain of function bioweapons research, which is a gigantic scam. The notion is that, hey, all of these pathogens are going to jump out of the jungle at any minute and kill you unless you trust us to spend billions or trillions of dollars researching. And not only are we going to research them, we're going to make them deadly ourselves. And they never understand why making it deadly in the lab makes it safer. It doesn't. But that's kind of the missing piece of the puzzle, but they kind of gloss that over. And then finally they decide, whether it's Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein decide, down by the pool on Rape Island, that they're going to release this. I don't think they ultimately were in charge of the release, but with the Project 201 took place very shortly before the lockdowns occurred, and maybe after the COVID SARS-CoV-2 virus got out of Wuhan. So, at any rate, that whole gain of function pandemic preparedness is a scam. The half-baked benefit is that something's going to jump out of the jungle and kill us all unless you have all these mad scientists creating bioweapons and then creating vaccines for them. And of course, the vaccine is great for you. Now, if you think about that with regard to geoengineering, it's the same thing. Instead of, we're in both cases, we're manipulating the weather, manipulating nature, Ron. In the case of the GOF and bioweapons, we're manipulating the microbes. And with geoengineering, we're manipulating the weather and the climate. They weaponize both of them. Obviously, the COVID virus, SARS-CoV-2, was a bioweapon, and they had a countermeasure for it. And geoengineering is a weapon. They've used it many times. If you just want to go back to Project Popeye, that's proof positive. But if you believe the Iranians, then it's going on today.
Just because we're on YouTube, right, Dr. Baker, and so that YouTube doesn't erase this, I just now have to say, all of the conspiracies around COVID are just that. Total conspiracy, guys. Everything you're told by the government about COVID is factual. We are simply talking about theories here. Okay, because I have to get that out of the way. Now, the thing is, right, you had mentioned Epstein and COVID. Now, we're going to set a date for you coming back and delving into that, because there's so much of those files that require individuals who are specialists in areas, and you're one of them. And I can't wait for that. Just in case anyone's ears pricked up when you'd said that and they were like, oh, I want some more information on that. We're going to bring that in our live stream, because the levels in which I think the average person can't comprehend the long plan format of a lot of these agencies and the people in charge. It's not because stuff takes a long time. It's because we don't notice things over 80 years, okay? We've noticed it now because we can scream on the internet about it. Do you see what I'm saying? Yes. But like I say, up until the internet happened, that was just a cool Scottish flag cloud in the sky to me as a little kid. So where's this all heading, right? Obviously, somebody in the side chat as well, Doctor, said, we humans are electrical, and that kind of put like a shiver up my spine when you were saying about electrical signals and waves can travel faster. It does. I mean, you can forgive people for going full-blown science fiction with this in their heads, because people like myself, when you hear about that, it's a scary concept of what are they trapping us inside? What is this new bubble of chemicals? And where are they heading with it? I mean, again, obviously it's speculation, and maybe you're going to get to that, but I'm triggered by a lot of this, so forgive my rambling.
Yeah, no, not at all. So let's take a step back and say, what can we say with a high degree of confidence, and what starts to go into the realm of speculation? Because it's easy to go off into speculation. Just to kind of ground it a little bit, and then we'll kind of go off on some of the speculative notions. There's no question the paper trail in the government documents, the hundreds, if not thousands of patents, the visible evidence as we all look up overhead and see that this is not just happening in Scotland or not just happening in parts of the US, but happening really worldwide. And the growing evidence of people starting to test and trying to figure out what's going on from the ground level tells us that this geoengineering process is real. And it also tells us that it's multifocal. It's not just cloud seeding. It's not just spraying the aluminum, barium, strontium into the air to create this low cloud cover. It's not just spraying sulfuric acid and sulfur dioxide. It's all kinds of things. We didn't even talk about HAARP, which of course is the high altitude tropospheric manipulation that unquestionably can manipulate the jet stream. So we have all these different things going on which are not being revealed to us, but they're definitely happening. So we know that. Now we have to kind of speculate. There you go. Now we have to speculate as to what the motivations are. I think unquestionably part of the motivation is weaponization of the weather by world governments. There's no question about that, because that's proven. The United States did it to Vietnam, and the United States has all kinds of documents going back decades that are in the public domain now, that demonstrate that they've been working toward this. And the United States is by no means alone. So weaponization of the weather is unquestionably part of it. I think that it's a fair question to say, why are they spraying us so heavily right now with all of this metal particulate matter? And I think that becomes something. Are they trying to poison us? Are they trying to control the food supply? Are they trying to diminish the food supply? It's an open question and a reasonable question. I don't have a definitive answer for that, but I think that's an open question. Are they trying to create this quote unquote Internet of Things? I think that's a fair question. I can't prove that, but I think that's reasonable speculation. And then you start to talk, as you mentioned about, Ron, some of the odds and ends that we see in the spraying, and even in the patents. There's patents to spray graphene oxide, US patents to spray graphene oxide out of airplanes. Now, why on earth do you want to do that? There's no reason to do that specifically to control the weather. So, what do we know? We know that the weather's been weaponized for many decades. Multiple governments do it. They feel that it's much like having nuclear bombs. It's something that they feel they have to do. We do know that it's been weaponized against our own people. It's happened in the UK. It's happened in the United States. We have good evidence that it's being used even in violation of the treaties that do exist. Oh, the other thing to point out is there's a treaty. There's an international treaty to limit this, called the NMOD Treaty. Now, the NMOD Treaty is very complicated, and it's kind of provides even more cover for them to do what they want to. But there is a treaty out there saying you can't weaponize the weather against other countries. It has a huge loophole that you can do it over your own airspace. But technically, there's a treaty from the 1970s that 190 plus countries signed, saying we won't weaponize the weather against other countries. Now, why on earth do you have an environmental modification treaty like that if you're not doing anything? It's totally unnecessary.
Would that cover airspaces through unification of countries? So if they all join together for, say, I don't know, Donald Trump's peace board, right? Just using that as an example, would those countries, because they have a treaty with America, fall under America's ability to manipulate their weather or the surrounding? Because if I have a country next to my enemy, right, and I go to the borderline of that country and I do a whole bunch of weather manipulation stuff that blows it into my enemy's country, right? Don't tell me that's not a tactic, MI6. I know you're watching, right? I imagine Dr. Baker, the alarm bells go off in certain buildings when he goes on the internet. He's spitting facts right now. So, like, there's got to be something. Is there something that would cover those countries being involved? Or would they even have the knowledge that their weather could be manipulated if they were in a treaty with another nation, such as, the US, for example?
Right. I don't think the NMOD treaty is very problematic. And that's something that it's worth going over, because it has these loopholes, and it even has these clauses where, countries are supposed to work together to create optimal weather and so on. So it doesn't really do what it purports to do. The main reason I brought it up was simply to say that you actually have, going back to the 1970s, a international treaty on this, problematic though it is. So if anyone wants to say this is all imaginary and this is all a bunch of tinfoil stuff, why do we have an international treaty trying to stop it? Again, the parallels to the pandemic preparedness, gain of function type stuff is so strong, because we also have a biological weapons treaty from around the same era, okay? And it's very much the same kind of thing. It has a loophole where you can do gain of function type research if you're doing it to develop a vaccine. So these things are to a certain extent fig leaves to allow people to continue to do it. But the utility of their existence is to demonstrate that this is a real thing. I mean, to me, that's what I think. You don't need an international treaty for something that's imaginary.
And by the very existence of developing an antibody or a vaccine, you need access to the horrors that you're trying to cure, right? It's a very, very interesting set of loopholes.
It is, but that, to be honest with you, though, that's the fatal flaw in that particular argument, because you don't need to weaponize a pathogen to figure out how to develop antibodies against it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Don't tell the public that, okay? Because we need to convince them of the opposite of that. We can listen. The evildoers. It's hard enough for the evildoers to do their evil doing, okay, without educating everyone on that. You know what I'm saying? But it's crazy because they'll take any excuse to just. And I tell you something, right? I'm sure the doctors, 99% of them, and the scientists know what they're doing. It's the people sealing those gloves that you see the scientists put their hand into, like a metal, like a glass container, where it's like mega Ebola is in there. And it's just a thin layer of latex. It's the guys putting that together I don't trust. Eventually, someone's going to go wish.com on all of their science equipment and something's getting out, doctor. That's all I'm saying. Because it is no joke. I mean, we've all seen the movies where someone's suit gets ripped open and then a button's pressed and everything gets burnt to a crisp. I'm sure that's happened a couple of times in some government facilities. You know,
it happens with. You would absolutely be.
I don't want to know.
It happens all the time. All the time.
There's the narrative for everyone's new fever dream. Okay, the fever dream nightmares. Okay, is that's crazy. It's wild.
So there's a couple of books that I would, and they're not easy reads, but I just, what I tell folks is, look, I'm on the show with you, Ron, and I'm just telling you my best understanding of things. And as I said, I try to step back and say, here are things that I'm confident I know about, and here are things that are speculative. But if you really want to get a comprehensive understanding of the history of this particular problem, of this geoengineering problem, at least from the standpoint of the weaponization of weather, the new book, Chemtrails Exposed by Peter Kirby, is a remarkable document. You'll learn about von Neumann, you'll learn about all of these guys that were involved. You'll learn about how it grew out of the radiation lab and how it's been growing for years and years. You'll learn about the ENMOD treaty. It's really quite a book. And then the other one that if you want to really know the pandemics, and this is an absolute masterpiece. When the Martians finally come in 1,000 years, they're going to read this book and say, "Oh my gosh, how crazy these people were." Right. Is Bobby Kennedy's the real Anthony Fauci, and those two books are very well resourced. They're very well referenced. They go to the original documents, and they will tell you 90+% of what you need to know with the real Anthony Fauci about the whole pandemic preparedness scam, and with Chemtrails Exposed, Kirby's book about the history of geoengineering. And you'll learn so much. The short source that I think is fantastic is Nicole Shanahan has a podcast called Dark Maha. And back in the middle of last year, I think it was June, she had spoken with a whistleblower and had written an excellent long article that was posted on X about geoengineering. And it's a fantastic, it's probably 3,000 words. It's not too long, but it's a fantastic, quick study of what's going on in this world that people can digest very easily. So those would be three resources I would really encourage people to if you just want to sit down, instead of reading some sci-fi book, read those, and you'll get very well resourced stuff. It's not so speculative. It's not going on a shaggy dog story. It's really well documented stuff.
And if anyone from Hollywood's watching, instead of pumping out our 9 Marvel movies, maybe make a movie about that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, take one of those books and make a movie about that. You know what I mean? Right. Listen, Doctor, I've got some questions from the side chat. One really simple one, and no pressure. How can we stop this madness? I mean, it's going to take what I refer to as an act of God, right? It's going to take a complete non-elite planned reset of the planet. The next form of life that takes over just has to do better, right? Because, what are we going to do? I mean, how do we do this?
So I will tell you what's going on in the United States, and it's sort of our best shot that we're working on. And one of them is that, in the 50 United States, we have at least in theory, we still have a republic, not an empire. And so at the state level, there are 36 states that have bills going through their legislature trying to stop geoengineering in the states that they have jurisdiction over. And so that's something that is becoming very, very prominent in the United States. 3 states have passed laws in the last year or two. The problem is they don't control the full airspace. Obviously, the federal government controls.
I was going to say, is this the classic local versus federal government
100%,
American?
100%.
That's the great American story, by the way. I just want to point out.
It is, and that's what we're trying to do here. And I'm involved in a number of those. So Florida has a law, Louisiana has a law, Tennessee has a law, and there are 36 other states that have legislation in process. Some of it's moving forward, some of it's getting stalled. Of course, there's black budgets and so on that are probably lobbying against it. It's tricky west of the Mississippi because so much of it gets, as you pointed out, so much of the old-fashioned cloud seeding, which is important, but which is a relatively small percentage of what we're talking about, gets kind of mashed in with this, and people do feel very much attached to the old cloud seeding method. So that will kind of spike some of the legislation against the other things that are going on. But there is a movement in the United States to stop this at the state level. There actually was a bill passed or not passed, but presented in the U.S. House of Representatives last year, House Bill 4403, the Clear Skies Act, which was sponsored by Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she's been kind of run out of office now. And Thomas Massey, who you may have heard of, was a signer of that or a sponsor of that. And there was another fellow who was. Now that Marjorie's out of Congress, they're looking to do other federal legislation, push other federal legislation to get this through. Now, can we legislate our way out of this? I don't know, but we are trying in the United States. And one thing I would, there's someone just put down there, RAF for cloud seeding when the Linton and Limit floods killed 35 people. So that was one of the episodes I believe I was referring to.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I would encourage people to simply, just contact. And I know you may feel like it's pointless, but I really think that there needs to be a mass movement in all countries saying this has to end. We can't survive. Our country can't survive with this. And a lot of this is beyond the national level. A lot of this is being done at the level of NATO. It's being done at the level of the World Economic Forum, as James O'Keefe exposed. So a lot of this is really the technocrats, the globalist technocrats, I believe. But it all becomes an interweaving web.
The act of God sounds way easier than what. It
sounds easier, yes.
Right. Just so you know, Doctor. I hear what you're saying. Right. There's the high road, and then there's just hopefully like the Acme anvil falls out the sky and crushes the overlords. I mean, the fantasy seems like a much more easier option because they set everything up. Paperwork, okay, is the greatest weapon the elites have ever manufactured. And I mean, as a UK citizen, we've all seen the memes of people in America going into the DMV and filling out a form. Oh, it's the wrong form. That is how this whole thing is set up, so that it takes months and months for you to get anywhere. And I think that's why the public feel like everything's useless, right? Because of the slog that is the red tape. So I imagine, to all the people out there, you got to fight the paperwork power, okay? The paperwork at the administrative process is the evildoer. You got to push through it, get it done. Because the more of us that create the noise, the better, right?
Absolutely. I'm actually very, I don't know a ton about UK politics, but I follow it a little bit. And I do know that one of, at least who I perceive as one of the good guys, Andrew Bridge, and I know he's out of office, is become very, very outspoken about geoengineering.
Well, British politics is pretty easy if you want to get into betray the people, don't listen to the people, destroy the people, destroy the culture, you'll get elected. I mean, that's basically that's the way it's going. It's a fantastic year so far. Another question for you here: is there any connection between chemtrails and the depletion of the ozone?
Okay, this is not a area of expertise for mine, but according to a geoengineering expert by the name of Dane Wigington, who runs geoengineeringwatch.org, which is a very good source of background information and so on. I encourage people to take a look there. He says absolutely yes. It's my understanding that the sulfur dioxide and sulfuric acid is really key in that, and that the HARP and the tropospheric manipulation is key in that as well. And one of the statements that he has made is that there's been an significant increase in the amount of UVC radiation. We always talk about UVA and UVB, but there's been a significant increase in UVC radiation due to depletion of the ozone. So it's my understanding from good sources that that's the case. And my best understanding is that that's the mechanism, and that's potentially catastrophic.
Yeah. And people out there are going to be saying, well, why would they want to screw up the soil? Why would they want to stop food from being grown? So they can sell you crops that will grow. Okay. If they can if they can control the weather, control the nature, control the soil, that's better for business. Do you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? If we're sitting in our evil skull-shaped cave, Dr. Baker, right, stroking our big fluffy cats, great business model for evil, right? Oh my God, the world is in a starving crisis. And now a BlackRock-owned subsidiary company is coming to save us with the super corn, right? It will grow anywhere. That's what's coming. That's what's coming. It's terrifying.
That is terrifying. And that is reportedly Monsanto's involved in developing aluminum-resistant corn and other products. So, this is really, it's really a terrifying situation. I do not have independent confirmation of that, but that's what I have been led to believe.
Listen, you know what you need to do? You need to go and get all your scientist buddies, right? And you need to actually make the Avengers. Okay, like we need a Hulk, and we need like a Wolverine and all of that, because other than that, bro, like what are we going? I mean, there's only so much we can scream and shout about, and a little bit makes me feel we're screaming and shouting about the stuff that was dangerous 20 years ago, and they've moved on to level 9 of the plan, and we've not even discovered the next layer of the evildoers plan, and they're going, they're fighting phase 8 when we're in phase 9. It's infuriating. The reality of it really is.
Yeah, it is. I think one of the things, though, that I personally try to do is not to abandon hope and not to stop doing what I can, because there's no point in that. Then you're guaranteed to lose. And I look at what's going on, and it's like, what's the saying? I think it's in economics that if something cannot go on forever, it will stop. And so what will happen when it does stop, I don't know, but I think we need to do our best to stop it.
100%. I'm not saying don't stop. I'm just saying on the weekends, Iron Man suit project. Okay. That's what I'm saying. I'm just at the weekends, Monday, Friday, fight the power. But at the weekends, bro, like if you come up with a better option, until you come up with that, get working on the Iron Man suit, if you don't mind, sir. Thank you very much. Let me just jump into these questions again. Okay, so there was an interesting point here about insects, right? Because weaponizing things that like to suck our blood, again, evil cave, isn't out of the question. Have you heard anything through the grapevine of the spraying of living things out of these chemtrails?
Again, this is something that I've heard. I haven't independently confirmed, but that reportedly Bill Gates has funded projects to develop mosquitoes that can act as vectors to deliver vaccines.
Yeah, do you know why? Do you know why you needed to get a mosquito to deliver a vaccine? Okay, because apparently he's riddled from rattling Russian birds with Epstein, and he needed to get a vaccine injected into his wife without knowing. That, do you know how much of a nerd you have to be to develop a STD antidote delivering mosquito, okay, to your wife. Do you realize the level of madness? I mean, that you've just nailed it. You've actually just put another link in the chain of this. Like, that's exactly what he was doing. I mean, I'm not saying that's what he was doing, but that's what he was doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's also evidence that in the United States that there is, because again, the biological weapons have a similar parallel history to the weather weaponization. And so there's also evidence that ticks have been worked on to become more pathogenic, to deliver illnesses, diseases to either humans or to or to animals. And of course, it's Marty Makary, who's currently the head of the FDA under Trump and Robert Kennedy, came out and confirmed what people have known for many years, which is that Lyme disease, which is endemic in the United States and is a tick-borne disease, was escaped from a lab, a U.S. military lab in Long Island. And if you look across Long Island Sound, the body of water north of Long Island, if you go just downwind 30 miles, guess where you are? You're in Lyme, Connecticut. So, this is something that we know that this is not the first, that COVID was by no means the first weaponized pathogen that got out of U.S. Government labs. So wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. I don't have confirmational, evidence of it.
And we all know the real reason that we were kept inside during COVID was because birds aren't real, and they had to change all the batteries in all of the birds around the world, which are just monitoring systems, Dr. Baker. Okay, that is the reality. You're here to tell us another story because you're part of the conspiracy that birds aren't real. But no, it's incredible when you actually think back to lockdown. And just from a moment of global synchronicity of us all being inside, the drone shots of, tourist places with no people in them, it was a very alarming moment, just how quickly we all fell into touch. Okay. Now, luckily, there ain't no vaccines in me. I was definitely not going to be taking. I remember, imagine, you got to think about these in the way that the iPhone 1 and compare that to the iPhone 17. I don't want the iPhone 1 version of anything, okay? Especially something that's been made under false pretenses to make a couple of quid, okay? No chance, mate, no chance. And then now look at all the poor souls, Doctor, look at all the poor souls who entire lives have been affected by a narrative that was pushed by health workers and politicians, and it is just horrendous.
Yes, it is. It's absolutely, and that's the playbook. And one thing that I was trying to stress before is that the playbook is very much the same. And again, we're thinking about what kind of motivation do you have for this? If you can create extreme weather events, you can lock people down due to extreme weather events, right? You can destroy entire countries.
Of course.
You can, and then you can subjugate them very easily, or you can partially destroy them, take out their electrical grid, and they become helpless. So,
listen, I'm sorry to put a dark spin on this, but I've always said the greatest gift to a elite level conspiracy of evildoers that want to get their hands on children, the greatest gift to them is a natural disaster in a third world country, right? All those undocumented individuals, because of the way those countries are structured, some countries are structured, go missing. Hey, no one's going to miss those 5,000 kids, right? And I mean, that's a grand conspiracy, right? But it's not out of the question for us to factor that in, especially when we look at the legal ramifications of some of the staff members of the Clinton administration during the Haiti earthquake. Now, you don't have to put your name to any of that theory, Doctor, because doctor, but I mean, it's not out of the question.
Yeah, I mean, very little is out of the question these days.
Right. It really is. You're right. Well, look, we've hit that kind of hour mark, right? Give us your summary, and we're going to, after this live, we're going to touch base on getting you back on within the next couple of days to talk about the Epstein files and COVID and how it all ties together, because I would love to be hearing about that, Dr. Baker. And again, there's some people you need to hear it from their expertise, and that's one of them. That's one of them.
So what I would say in summary is a couple of things. Number one, don't allow people to gaslight you on this issue. There's absolutely no question that when you look up in the sky and you see these patterns, this is abnormal, completely abnormal. This is completely deliberate, and this is deliberate air pollution with particulate materials when we're seeing these chemtrails, so-called. And there's a variety of things going on. So if someone says, no, it's not this, it's that, there's a number of things going on. We can be talking about, as I said, sulfuric acid or sulfur dioxide compounds in the high atmosphere. We can talk about nanoparticulate metals in the stratosphere, aluminum, barium, strontium, and so on. We can talk about other nanoparticles, graphene oxide, and so on. And then we can talk about old-fashioned cloud seeding with silver iodide or products like that. And then there's other things that we don't even know about, probably.
Well,
so there's a variety of things going on. It's absolutely real. It's absolutely there.
Do you know what? Let's get a part 2 on this subject booked in as well, Doctor, because we've just scratched the surface, I can tell. And I don't think this is a subject where I want to fall into the pigeonhole of just offering the viewers the surface level analogy of this. I think giving you an opportunity to go full Dr. PowerPoint presentation, like university freaking lecture hall on this, is going to be an absolute bonus to everyone watching. So I just want to say thank you so much for giving up your time today, for coming and like really solidifying that we're all not crazy. Okay. And that when you nailed it with the gaslight, you know, and I don't know if the stuff they're spraying in the sky is the reason why none of us are reacting, why we're so docile, you know, and is it, are all the people that are completely hooked on the internet that stay inside the ones that see the truth in it all? Is it because we're breathing less of this stuff in from outside? Like if people have got I don't know. There's something there, but we'll get some more shows booked in, Doctor, because we need to expand on this more. And thank you so much for giving up your time. I really do appreciate it. Just stay there because I want to just get everything clarified with you. But thank you so much for today. I really do appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure. And again, I would encourage people, you know, to focus on just the fact that this is real, that there's tons of speculation about it. Some of the speculation may be fanciful, some of it may be legitimate, but there is reality here, deep reality here. It's very, very concerning, and it really needs to be brought to an end.
Anyone disagrees, have a word with yourself. How about that? Right. So, Dr. Baker, thank you. To the mods, to the admin, to the Shaun Attwood channel, thank you. And for me, Ron Swanson, as always, be safe out there, guys. Peace.